Brandy, we will do our best.
Well, just don't think I'm rude if I've got to cut out of here.
We won't think that because you got to cut out of here.
You'll think that for
Just in
all the other reasons. Yeah. Good. At least take it for the right reasons.
All right. We'll call the meeting to order. This is a reconvening of our BET meeting of November 12th that was recessed until this morning. Looks like everybody's here. Primaries are here except for the assessor and the court clerk. Their alternates are here. Welcome. All right. What?
I make a motion to return from recess.
Thank you. Do we have a second? We got a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you, Cassie. All right. Where do you want to pick up? Which was where? Item 6.
The information I have is still incomplete from the detention center, but I got some stuff that wasn't particularly helpful, but I'm still waiting on how many open positions are funded and have been for at least a year. So Chris was gone Friday and I guess again today, but my suggestion is that we go ahead and make whatever necessary recommendations to redo the MOUs with the DA and the detention center for them to absorb the DA person and the 5 people that they have now. 3 of them are funded through the MOU, but a total of 5 people they have now running these reports and writing the summaries. And then to recommend extending the team contract for the full year if we get the other MOUs fixed. And I'm assuming that's some combination of a recommendation to the budget board and the OCC.
What if the district's attorney's office and the detention center are not amenable to absorbing those positions?
I think the detention center will be. On the DA, I don't know.
I'll say, well, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to throw this out because just in case it has to come back here at a later date. Speaking to Joe, District 1 doesn't have a vote at budget board, but at BOCC, he's not in favor. Now that situation could change come BOCC, but I don't anticipate him signing anything that has an increase over what we had allocated for the entire year from court services. So as we're looking at that, I just want to say if we get into a situation to where we make a recommendation and it goes to budget board, it still may not be there. So as we're looking at it, we may consider that. So.
Well, then I think that answers the question I was going to ask.
Okay.
So essentially, in keeping that into consideration, essentially the money that we already have within the 3 contracts, we couldn't go above and beyond the normal annual budget for court services between all 3 of them.
Correct. Okay. But it's not just the general fund budget. It's because
it's all of the special, right. All things considered, including the special revenues. Right. I understand that. And so where we are now then is we're still about 300,000 short, right, of that number.
Because we're already going above.
Right.
Right.
So even if we were to find money elsewhere, you seem to think that one vote of the BOCC won't be amenable to that only because that is above and beyond the court services budget?
Well, that's something that is being considered. I don't want to get into that necessarily because it's a BOCC matter.
Sure.
We have a quorum of BOCC members here. I'm just saying that if that were an issue, then we could wind up being right back where we are. So.
Well, I was gonna ask the question, and it might be contradictory to what you just said, as far as finding money elsewhere, other than the other two MOUs. Like say, for instance, what shakes out from social services.
That was one of the questions I had when we met. Is there still some money sitting in 1260 that's available? And I just don't have access to that. So. Do you?
I don't think the court services, or I'm sorry, social services money.
Social services.
Social
Yeah,
services.
sorry.
social
Okay.
Yeah, from
I
what
thought you
shakes
said
out from
top
all of that, since there's gonna be changes made, there might
I
be
gotcha.
some,
what?
yes, some funds available.
Social services money is already committed, isn't it?
Well, some of it is, but I don't think our office would not be in favor of using that. I mean, we can use that money kind of short term, but for long term forecasting, our hope in District 1 is that the legislature comes back this session and makes a lot of the things that they repealed and took away from counties, makes it, because before the social services aspects were mandatory, counties shall. What we had efforted last legislative session and what we hope will happen this year is go back to those statutes and just, instead of repealing them, you put them back and change the language from shall to may,
Right.
so that counties can operate in those areas. For instance, on the burial and cremation, if the county chooses to do that, if the county chooses to provide indigent pharmacy, that they can. And we're hopeful that something like that happens. And if it does, we would want to make sure that there is social service money available in the future to budget for that.
Correct.
So, I mean, if we were to use remaining social services money this fiscal year, that may not be available for next fiscal year.
Right.
So it's just a short term, it's not sustainable
Right.
as far as that.
And that's what I think we, I mean, in fairness to all of our partners, team, and, you know, the detention center and the DA's office, I think we need to come up with something that is a sustainable
Oh, sure,
long-term solution.
yeah, I mean, if we're anticipating getting social services back, then yeah, I mean, that's not a long-term solution, you're right.
How much of the contract's just for team and the DA's office?
The team is 1,300,000. Well, their budget was 1,359,1494.
And what's the DA?
DA, you have 73,919.45 for the employee and some other miscellaneous things, plus an additional 42,400 for Connexus and Allied Universal.
But that's not on the
IT,
DA,
but it's
right?
no, but it was added to IT for the DA.
And we're
It's
double
new
paying for that
expenses.
because we're paying for it.
Yeah,
Team
it's new expenses.
So if we were just to have the team contract and then the DA's employee, what is that number? It's like just over 1.4.
Mm-hmm.
And Grant's budget was about 1.4.
Just under, wasn't it, like 1.38?
So Grant's budget for 24, starting out 24-25 was 1,184,000.
For general fund.
With all the special
General fund.
revenues.
No, you add in the special
Right,
revenues,
and
and
so
that
it's
got it to the
1.38.
1,362,503.
But
And
some
team
of
was
that,
coming in at 1,350,000, so that's what we thought was covered, and then coming in about 10,000 less.
Right,
but I
And
do,
we lost revenue.
That's what I was
and
gonna say.
I can't stress this
I think-
enough, so you really can't.
you can't include that special revenue from the
Right.
GPS fees.
Well, and the
You-
community service fees. I mean,
Right.
I've honed in on
And the what
GPS
fees?
because I feel like that needs to be budgeted, but you've lost all the revenue that was coming into 1260.
I'm
No
glad
one's
you
collecting
mentioned that. Chris, thank you for coming. I do have a question about that
Yeah.
GPS monitoring.
For their.
I understand that there was a question of, that's something that we collected on, but that's something that team is currently not collecting on, right?
Correct.
And is there a particular reason to why you cannot?
The reason is, when we took over the pretrial services, the advisory committee that oversees conditional bond for the county, Judge Stoner, Ms. Behenna, and several others, had strongly encouraged and directed us to achieve the national certification
Yes.
for pretrial services.
Mhm.
We've got 3 staff who have achieved that status, and we are on pace to achieve that status by the end of the year, first part of next year. And one of the criteria in the national certification best practices is that you cannot
Mhm.
charge individuals financial services for conditions that are court ordered. By virtue of who qualifies for conditional bond in this program, this county program, the individual is indigent. If they could afford their bond, they would not be assigned to us. And so in order to follow the direction of the advisory committee, we are adhering to best practices. And we're not enforcing the monthly fee on individuals who simply cannot afford to pay it.
One thing that, can I throw something out just real quick? Following the advice of the advisory committee, I get that, but that advisory committee is a committee to make recommendations to BOCC, and BOCC is the one that makes that ultimate call. So I think that the things that you guys are doing, I think just because that advisory board, and that's kind of where our old court services department kind of got into some issues, because I know there were things that that advisory board wanted Grant to do, and Grant's response was always, I get it, but I work for the Board of County Commissioners. If we want that, that has to go to the Board of County Commissioners for them to approve or not approve that, right? So I think, we could, I think theoretically, BOCC could approve in their contract with team that they want you to follow best practices and certification aspects, with the one exception of collecting revenues for.
Well, I was gonna
For
ask
those
if that's
services.
part of the contract or the MOU or whatever it is with team, was that they achieved the
I think
national
there-
certification.
I think there was mention in there about utilizing best practices.
Yeah.
I think there was language like that. But once again, that could be cleared up that says utilizing best practices. However, we do expect that team would collect, whatever, the service fees or GPS monitoring fees, whatever. I mean, all that stuff could be laid out in the contract between the Board of County Commissioners.
So
and the
is it true though, that if you did start collecting these fees, whatever fees they are, that you could not obtain that national certification?
That is correct.
So it's one or the other?
It's one or the other, and whatever direction you guys want to give us is fine, but we're getting mixed messages because it is in the contract that we will see.
But that's what we're looking at as far as moving forward, because this contract expires the end of December.
Right.
So moving forward, January
Right.
forward, there's gonna need to be another contract.
Right.
And so, and I get that it may not be that, but BOCC, I'm not saying whether BOCC should do that or shouldn't do that. I'm just saying that
That might be something
BOCC
to consider,
could do that.
right?
And
Do you mind if I add something? Sorry.
Sure.
So there were 2 separate classes of people before when we had conditional bond. There were people who were completely indigent and were with the public defender's office, and we would write paid for out of the indigent fund, so those individuals would not pay for ankle monitors because they couldn't. There also were people who posted bond, who the judges wanted on ankle monitors, so those individuals often were the people who paid. I think we still have those individuals. I think a lot of them are high supervision or higher need, and so I think a lot of those are with the DA's office. So
Yeah.
I think the individuals that team's getting are those individuals who are indigent, who are not paying conditional bond, and I think a lot of the people who are on bond because they have, again, higher supervision needs, I think those are the individuals that are monitored more closely through the DA's office, so those would be the individuals who have the ability to pay.
Well, so then we could just look at what, because I think Kathy's presented money to Miranda this year for folks that have turned in money, so we can look and see, and if those dollars are averaging what we had going into this other account, then we would know that that is the case. If it's not, if it's like, oh, these dollars are coming up to $28,000 is what we anticipate for the year from the dollars, and I'm not saying that's the number, I'm just pulling that out, of money that Kathy may or may not present, but before it was 60,000, then we know where's that extra, that 28,000 versus the 60,000.
Yes, I think there is a class of people who do have the ability to potentially pay, and no one has an issue with those paying, and then there are these individuals who aren't and can't, and there were that class of people, but they were with conditional on too, they just came out of that indigent fund.
Mr. Chair, could I also say something else? Just for clarification, we had originally asked for 1.35, but the contract that we have, half of it is actually the official contract is 1.321, 463.25. I'm sorry, I can't see with or without my glasses.
463.25?
Yeah, the actual contract that we have right now is for $1,321,463.25.
And it was half of
It's
that?
half of that, right?
Yeah,
The
half
contract
of
that
that,
you
I'm
have.
sorry, half of that, yes. And so I also want to say, so within this budget, we're living within the budget that I just presented, that we feel like was agreed to. I know we're here now and this is where we're at, but we're not asking for more money to do to achieve the national certification and do the conditional bonds the way that we're doing. What we've done is we've not filled one full-time position in order to have enough money to do everything that the court is asking us to do, including the ankle monitors. And I would just remind the committee that we're seeing a lot more than we anticipated on ankle monitors, which is fine, which is great. We've got the infrastructure to monitor that, the software, everything. But when we realize what the trajectory is, we intentionally chosen to be more efficient within our staff so that we can live within this budget should you choose to move forward with it. That's one thing. The other thing I would say, just as a reminder, we are currently, as of today, actively supervising 843 individuals on conditional bond. That's more than any statistics that we could find in years past. So we're actually serving more for less than in years past. But the final thing I would say in this national certification best practices, and there's research and science and logic behind every requirement that you would have to achieve in order to have that designation. Part of that is we have to keep our caseloads manageable and at a certain ratio. And we built this budget around that with the anticipation that we will likely be serving 925 individuals or more by the end of June.
Mr. Speaker, do you recall how many before we made the switch, our court services department was monitoring and providing supervision to some, and then you guys were doing some? Do you know what those totals between what you were doing before and what our group was doing?
We didn't have great numbers from court services. I mean, when we took over court services, I think they were actively supervising like 50 to 60 when we took them over. Now that some attrition had occurred because, when people started, I don't know all those dynamics, but at that time we were probably serving in the neighborhood of 375, 400.
Okay. So are those 375 to 400, are you still doing those and then plus 843, or does the 843 include?
It's a total it's a total because everybody fits. And the other thing that was told to us when we started this process, I'm really glad that Bridget and Vicki are here, is that we needed to streamline our conditional bond services so that we didn't have two or three or four different entities basically serving the same population. We worked really hard to have standard practices and protocols and procedures in place so that we know exactly who qualifies and what the process is for getting that person on a conditional bond. And so they had intentionally directed us to streamline these services so that we have a standard sort of way of doing things.
So a follow-up on that, and I appreciate that. That was one of the big goals of moving forward, as well as getting additional services. So before you were at 375-ish, and now we're at 843. So are you, the money that you were spending before for the 375, are you guys still spending that on the 375 and we're funding the additional 500, or are we funding the full?
We are supplementing, if it were 1.321 and 400,000, we're supplementing this contract by about $465,000 over the course of the year. That's what we're supplementing this with private funding to provide those additional wraparound services.
You said how much was that, 465?
465, yes.
Is that roughly what you were spending before on the 375?
It was more. Before it was more, but that funding has gone away when we achieved this contract.
What was that funding?
It was roughly, we were serving 375 to 400. It was roughly 900, maybe 920,000, 950,000, something in that neighborhood.
Because I was thinking, and I could be wrong, but I was thinking in one of the meetings or two of the meetings that it was mentioned that you were going to continue funding what you were doing before, the way you were doing it before, and that the county was going to be giving you money for the additional uptick, which would be, in this case, roughly 500.
Well, so it's all together, and we streamline processes. But if we add our 465, this budget, goes up to 1.8 million or what have you, and that's what it's costing to provide all of the wraparound services that we have indicated that we would continue to provide for this population. But in the process, we've also streamlined everything and the created as many efficiencies and standard protocols as possible.
And I appreciate that. I think from my perspective, I thought that the money that you guys were spending before was going to be the same. And then we were going to be supplementing that because we were going to be increasing your load. So that's where, we've lost between what we were doing before and what you were doing before versus what you're just doing now. We've lost $500,000 of funding.
But we're serving more people. Like the funding that we had that we went out and fundraised in years past to demonstrate that we could provide these wraparound services and have the kind of caseloads and the outcomes that I think that we would all want. That was, we do that fundraising through our nonprofit. That funding, for the most part, has gone away when we achieve this contract because our funders know now that we've got this streamlined process and we're going to be able to create the efficiencies and the standard protocol that we were directed to create, which we've done. But we also know that there's things that we provide that this contract does not provide, things like employment services, things like a $500 allotment for every participant to obtain housing and transportation and so on and so forth. That's what the 465 is going towards. So we maintained our service model that we had developed and tested and proven through private funding to have the opportunity now to streamline the whole process. And again, I would say that we're serving more people for less dollars than the county has ever served.
Well,
and I still think that the budget is.
Well, when I look at the 500,000 reduction, and now we're $300,000 short, maybe even a little more if you take into account the non-collection of some of the fees. if that 500,000, if your fundraising was still at the same level it was before, then we don't have the hole. It would be there. And my concern is, right now, your fundraising went from the 920 to 950 to the 465 when you got the contract with the county. What happens if we're able to come up with 300,000 to fill the hole for all three? It's not just on you, it's the other contracts as well. If we come up with that 300,000, but then you lose some or all of that 465,000 because you lost 500,000. If you lose the rest of that 465, then we have another hole of 465,000. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, except for the 465,000 are for services that were never a part of this contract and wouldn't ever, I mean, unless you guys change what is an allowable expense.
Well, so what was the 500,000 though that you don't have anymore?
The case management, the exact services that were provided.
So all of what you were funding before, those services that you were funding before that the county is now, we sent you our piece, the piece that you were doing, kind of like what we were doing. Now the county is funding that 100%, even the ones, and that's kind of where my confusion was, because I had thought that.
So we're essentially paying for the whole program, not just the increase that we were sending you.
Well,
And I think that was my understanding was that we were just paying for the additional,
right.
and that the level that they were funding and doing before was going to stay the same.
Mm-hmm.
We were going to add our folks into the mix so that we do get the efficiencies and
And then
we
pay
get
for the
everything
overage
together,
that we're
and then-
incurring.
yeah.
what I'm telling you is that when we took over court services with supervising roughly 50 people, we've added 500 roughly to that number. So you're still getting more services for less dollars per participant if you just consider the increases from what court services were doing into what we're doing now.
I get that if we're looking at, and I'm not trying to be argumentative, but I get it if we look at it as a per person standpoint. But the county in the past had, I think the Board of County Commissioners had recognized that we needed more services in our court services department. We just didn't have the funds to be able to do that. And so I think what we saw here was an opportunity to utilize the service that you guys were doing and have proven that it would work, and that we could spend the same amount or less that we were spending on our old program and move it all over to you, and then you continue doing what you were doing before with the funding that you had before, and just get an influx of money from us. And now we could have the services, the additional things that you're talking about that you're able to provide, that we'd be able to actually have those services for those folks with the allocated budget that we had available.
And I would submit that you are. You're getting $500,000 worth of services that didn't previously exist.
Well, no, I'm saying we are getting the services. I'm just saying that we thought, I think from the county standpoint, we thought that we were going to be getting those services at the same expense that we had for our old program that didn't have those services.
Well, and so, again, I would just go back to say the origins of team taking over this contract were, we were given the budget to the sheriff's point. We were given the budget that court services had operated within last year. We actually originally submitted a budget for what we knew it would take to achieve the best practices, the national certification standard with appropriate caseloads and all related services for less than that total amount of contract. I mean, from what you were spending. And then through the course of whatever, it was determined that the team couldn't officially do the NCIC checks and the summary, so those people had to go somewhere else. And so part of the contract went there, and then.
But the dollar amount didn't change. We had a dollar amount for you to provide everything, the 1.3 whatever, and then when those other positions went elsewhere, we didn't change this dollar amount. We left this budget the same. So should we not look at taking the amount needed for those 4 or 5 positions that were included originally, since they're not needed in your office anymore, because we're having to do that elsewhere, reduce those. So if we reduce those 5 positions, that was you said 74,000 to the DA's office and 145 to the detention center. That's 220. If that was out, that gets us close to the 300,000. Then if the detention center, since they're they don't have the staff to fully utilize their salary and benefit budget, they could absorb those. So then we don't have that 145, then we would have a cost savings. We have a net effect. If we took those that 220 out of this contract, and then we have the 145 savings on the detention center, you got 220 and 145, you got 365. We're $300,000 short. If we do it like that, now we're $65,000 positive. That gives us a little bit of room for maybe additional GPS monitoring for team, that it looks like you need more money over in that piece. Did that make sense?
I followed you.
Okay.
Chris, tell me the amount of the annual contract now. You're saying it's not 1,000,000, the 350,914.
The annual contract right now is 1,321,463.25.
It was funded at half at 675 though,
I
right?
think they need a little more money up front on the first 6 months.
Gotcha.
But I've been using half. I'm still using them 1,350,000 when I look at figures. So
We would
that's
love that. That's the case, but
And sorry to interrupt again, I will say for future reference, I do think this will end up saving money all around. A lot of the individuals who were on conditional bond were on OR bonds. When we switched to team, most of the judges are giving everyone UAs, all the services. In the future, we're looking to implement that PSA, and we've approved that. I think it will take around 6 months to a year. But with that, it also recommends like people who are lower risk who don't need those services won't be using the resources from extra UAs and all that stuff, because that's obviously something that costs team, the county, everyone money. And so not every single individual will be getting that. So those are savings we would see in the future just with the transition. At first, everybody wanted everyone to have all the conditions. So I think over the long
But those
run-
are adjustments over the long run. If we do
Yes,
see that, we can make adjustments later.
Yes, I'm
But
saying
if
I
those-
think it'll end up saving money long term, just right now,
But if
saving more money to
But
start.
we think that it'll save money long term. We don't know that. So if we don't make adjustments now and we're banking on the come, then, and it never meets out, then we don't have those savings, right? Whereas if we plan for the worst and hope for the best and build everything around what the conditions are right now, if we do have savings in the future and we see that, then we can always make adjustments and maybe put more money over into certain programs so that we can increase.
Yeah, so I just wanted to put that on the radar that we anticipate that happening and less people having to do and use all these resources.
Here's maybe another tack. So between court services, the 40 or so, or whatever number you said, maybe they were supervising and you guys were supervising 400 and something. I mean, it sounded like it's still under about 500. I may be wrong with those numbers, but now you're supervising 843. Some portion of that population would be in the detention center, right? And so I'll go ahead and ask the question I think I know the answer to, just to make sure I know the answer. Is it cheaper to have them in the detention center, or is it cheaper for the county? I'm not talking about overall, but to the county's bottom line, is it cheaper to have them in the detention center or on your services?
our services.
By how much, do we know?
County would say it's costing, what, $46 or so a day to,
Per head.
And I think that number actually went up.
I think it might
It
have
might
been.
be 60 or 63, I think.
I think that from a monetary and a human standpoint, having people out that can be out and should be out, should be out. That's why we had a pretrial services program in Oklahoma County to make sure that those folks were out.
I'm not arguing about putting them back. I'm just saying there should be a peace dividend here that, again, we are not recognizing because of the structure of government. We've created a political subdivision. We get no yield from the savings, and we're not able to transfer that savings to this program.
Yeah, what
The part that's housed within the detention center already is a separate funding line item. It's not coming from the savings. The detention center realizes the staff person at the DA's office is a separate line item. There's no money flowing from the savings from the detention center. And then there's no money flowing from the savings at the detention center, not having these people in there to team.
I think the way that I hear what Jason's saying is that if team is now supervising 400 more people than we previously were, that 400, which is quantifiable to some number, in long term should eventually be reduced from the jail's budget. I mean, just to put it.
Or passed along.
Right,
The structure makes it hard because if it's a regular county department and not a separate political subdivision, this would be a much simpler conversation to have. And I'll save the rest of the speech for another time, but you know where I'm going with that.
Yeah.
So, but the money needs to follow. This is money that the county is giving for the criminal justice system as it exists. And if you need fewer resources here and more here, then the money ought to move to fill the buckets where it's needed. And we've got a structure right now where that doesn't happen. I'm simply suggesting that we work with the county, and I don't know where I think it's a BOCC function, but to look at the MOUs we have with the DA's office and with the detention center, where the detention center, with their unfilled positions that are funded, that money from that reservoir flowed to fund the position in the DA's office. I'm not suggesting we move the position, but that money be used to fund these positions that keep people from lingering in the detention center. Just saying the savings that the detention center is realizing ought to flow to support those services that continue the positive snowball effect of reducing the population of the detention center. And they're already, I think, covering 2 positions at the detention center. They're writing the summaries for NCIC for team. We're funding 3 out of the MOU, but I think they added 2 more. They've got a total of 5, is my understanding.
Yeah.
So they're already picking up the cost of 2 of those. I'm saying have ask the detention center to amend the MOU to pick up the other 3. And then the position in the DA's office for this separate population. They continue to supervise it there, same person can do it, but the money from the savings of not having these people sitting in the detention center should flow to fund the services to keep that happening, not be hitting us up for more money for something that costs less. I don't understand why it would persist. We're being asked for more money for something that's costing us less money. It doesn't make any, I don't know what I'm missing. So that's all I'm suggesting. And I think what Chris is saying makes sense. I mean, the more success they have in keeping people out, there's fewer people in the detention center, that money ought to continue to flow. I mean, if team, all of a sudden they're only supervising 200 people, but their contract remains the same, I think somebody'd have a problem with it. They'd be going, well, we need to put it to the detention center because that's where those people are. Well, the opposite's happening now, but the money's not following. And to me, it's just a question of, we need to make a recommendation, at least I do, for the person I work for and represent here, that we don't spend more money on something that is costing less money until we've asked BOCC or had some expectation that they'll go back and work to modify the MOU at the detention center to fund these other positions. And my conversation with 2 of the trust members, if they've got that money, which it looks like they do, they don't have a problem with it. I mean, there needs to be more. I'm not speaking for them, but I haven't run into a roadblock yet. no major concerns have arisen, so I think we just need to move forward talking to them about sharing some of that savings with the entities and the personnel that are actually keeping the population down.
I mean,
And just so everyone knows, we haven't seen an uptick in NCICs from the start of this. We've been getting around 15 a day, and whether there's more staff or anything, that number has not changed. We get around 15 every single day.
The summaries or the,
Yes. I know you said they added additional staff at the very beginning. I think they had 2 or 3 members, and we were getting a very low number a day. That number is still.
you're only seeing 15 NCIs a day. The reason I said.
the summaries.
Well, because when the jail was in here last week, they reported they did 100 in that same day that they walked in here.
Mhm.
I saved all the emails I have around 15 on every single.
Yeah, I had heard that separately also.
Maybe you gotta check your
So,
junk file.
I definitely have checked it many times. I know they reported last month that they did 566, and
In the whole month.
20. Yes, they said they did 566 summaries for the month, and I checked that averages to around 28 a day. And so I have been back through all my folders to check because we still are getting around 15 a day.
Because there were 3 that moved.
mhm.
One of those people quit, they replaced that person, and then they told me that they'd added 2 more. I think it was in the emails that you sent,
Yeah.
so.
I just say a couple things. One, even without talking to Jill, I'm fairly confident they would certainly have that money. By way of the medical contract that now is significantly overfunded, and 2, just putting a simple calculator on the number of vacancies regarding the number of FTEs they have budgeted. The only other thing that I would have kind of for Chris and Kathy both, if y'all know, I remember back when Grants asked for his budget, for some reason I hate my life going back and watch those BET meetings again, and he had reported that they were supervising 5 to 550 at that time, not 50. Are you able to confirm what that number was? Because Grant in his BET presentation said he didn't use the term actively supervising, so I'm not sure if there's possibly a nuance in that. He suggested that they were at some times up between 600 and 700, but at that exact time they were between 5 and 550.
Was that an annual number or a current?
That was current.
Yeah, I have between OR, conditional warrant, and GPS, all 3. That's the difference, that included ORs.
Okay,
And ORs, you don't supervise, they're out on
Okay.
their recognizance. And
okay,
there's no reason to have supervision.
Okay.
That number-
So it was an inflated number.
What number was the OR? Do we know?
I will say when we went through all those numbers, there were people who had went AWOL or who had disappeared but were showing still active, and so I know team had to go through and get contact information to a lot of people, so
Insane.
I think the DA's office, we kind of had to go through every
How many
one
are
of
in
those.
OR?
I can tell you that.
What would be the difference between the 50 they were actually supervising and the 500 and something? So roughly 500.
I didn't, I will just tell you, and I wasn't in the DET meetings, for whatever presentation was given. All I can tell you is that when we took over, there were approximately 100, maybe 150 individuals on OR. But again, that's not any level of service. I mean, there's just nothing, there's no supervision there. And then there were about 40 to 50 people on active conditional bond when we took over. Now, I want to be fair in that because I don't know what was before that and we couldn't get the hard data. And I do think there was a period of time when there was some attrition to the number of people that they were supervising, perhaps, but those are the facts of when we took over. And you know, when I'm saying 843 active participants, every one of those individuals are on a conditional bond with conditions that have to be supervised, monitored, recorded, and reported back to the judges and the district attorney.
Once I understand it, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know Grant had several numbers that he would present, whether it was in this meeting or in some of our other meetings. And one was like the big number, which he would say is people that have been in there for years in their system and it's just not cleared out of their system. And that they weren't actively monitoring all of those. There was a bunch that they weren't, but then there were numbers of the ones that they were actively monitoring it. I'm sure we can go back and
Well, I think
get
that
those numbers.
the detention center will help us if we just ask them. I don't know that, but in the few conversations I've had, everybody's like, seems reasonable. If they have the money, there's no doubt they have the money,
Well, I saw, and
so.
I saw an email from somebody that was asking about us moving, and I was just totally unclear because I didn't think we did this at all, but they were asking us to move money from their salary and benefits into M&O and capital for different things. So just because there's salary savings doesn't mean that they're not planning on spending it in another way.
Well, then, so, I mean, I hear you, but I mean,
All I'm saying is, in fairness to everybody that is part of this process, we need to come up with a good solution that it gets us through short term, but it also is a long-term viable solution so that you're not having to come back and waste your time, going through all of this. Ms. Behenna's not having to come in, Bridget's not having to come in, because it seems like we've got a program, at least on your end. We may have some issues on the NCICs and the reports, getting them over, but once, whether it's 15 or 100, once they get to you, we've got a streamlined process that these folks are getting their services and all that. So if we can get the front end stuff figured out and it's smooth and it dovetails with the smooth process that you have on the back end of actually serving the people, then it will be something that we're not having to, make difficult decisions on moving forward if we plan it out right in front from the get-go.
How much money was even left, after the supplement that's not considered one-time money? Somebody remind me of that, dude.
The amount, 1.5. I got it.
Yeah, $1,582,099.22.
That was part of the supplement?
Mm-hmm.
That's what we have right now in reserve that is not one-time funds.
Yeah, left available.
so the county could seek to amend the MOU with the detention center to get their agreement to begin funding the position in the DA's office and to assume complete funding of the positions they have that are producing the summaries at the detention center. And then that money, trying to figure out how they can get the money to finish out the last 6 months of the contract for team from that savings. We could look at the 1.5 million in reserve, but then that sounds like that still is costing more money for something that's less expensive. We go that route. I'm trying to figure out how do you take the personnel money that we're already providing to the detention center to actually pay for personnel that are helping keep people out of the detention center.
Well, I too, like Cody, I am in a position where I'm only able to approve up to the previous amount, including the special revenues and service fees, regardless of whether they're collected again, that 1.38 number. And, kind of like I said after talking with my boss, it feels like things kind of got out of order. And again, kind of to my point, I feel like math has an operational, order. And I feel like team kind of somehow got pushed out of place, from their original ask. So however we rectify that, I don't know, but again, I'm in a position that District 1's in, so.
So I feel like I'm in the same position, so, the problem here is there's plenty of money to fund this without coming to the county for the money. That's why I just keep not understanding. I'm missing them.
The problem is the money's in a bucket that we can't get the money out of. I mean, that's
Well, we don't know that. I think we can.
Now, CJA, I mean, you can terminate in 30 days if we're paying monthly, so you just picked up 6 months.
Gosh.
By paying,
Because it's past 11:15.
CJA is paid monthly, their contract for this, so, and you've got a 30-day out clause, you exercise it December 1, and
But I'm thinking we don't go there. I think they will help us if we just ask them. I'm not in a position to go ask them because it's a BOCC function. I mean, the budget board doesn't contract or do the MOUs. We may have the piece with the money part, but I think I expect that they would help this year. I mean, I think they see the value of the program. They don't want these people in the detention center any more than anybody else does. I think it's a function of asking to amend and I would think if both parties are good with amending the MOU, that it's not a big deal.
let me be very, very clear. When I said pull the trigger, we would be talking to them first.
Okay.
To terminate it. Please.
Oh, it's part, okay.
Yes, oh no, I'm not just saying just pull the, I said pull the trigger.
Yeah.
I was thinking dates. No, we approach them,
That can get you
terminate
put in a
the contract, and go from there.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, yes.
But I think that would be our recommendation, is that basically we're gonna have a hard time with the budget board providing money, so it really becomes incumbent upon the BOCC to go back and ask to amend the MOU with the detention center to make sure the funds flow where they need to go. We know the revenue is there. That's what I'm. I mean, I would think the DA's office could receive the money if it's transferred as part of an MOU to help fund the position.
I'm just wondering if, to accomplish what you're talking about, we've got a cost to handle law enforcement that's county related in the county, whether it's the sheriff's budget over here, or from there, you got the, pre-arrest expenses and then the post-arrest, okay? Post-arrest is gonna be the folks that are in the detention center, us paying for the detention center, as well as folks that are out of the detention center, due to whether it's OR or, ankle monitoring or whatever. I'm wondering if we couldn't have our program, our pre-trial services program, but we sent that funding, the amount, the 1.38 million, we sent that to the detention center for them to turn around and send a check to team, send a check to the DA's office. That way their employees are the ones that are getting the NCICs and everything over to team to process that, right? I mean, it's all part of that. So if we just increase the budget to the detention center for the cost that we have been previously paying for pre-trial, and then give that to the detention center for the detention center to carry out that function on our behalf, then they would be any of those offset dollar amounts. What you were saying is if team's number, if their expenses are going up because they have more people, that means that the detention center expenses should be going down because they have less people, right? So it should be an equilibrium for the detention center if we give them the money that they have now for doing the operations that they currently have, plus we give them the money for the pre-trial services, then they take those two amounts and keep that equilibrium within their own organization.
Can I just comment? I mean, look, I need to think about this.
Yeah, I mean, it could be a terrible idea, it's just.
I don't know how that solves the problem, which is to try to get the funds and the resources to the people that need to run the pretrial diversion program. And what I fear is that if the money goes to the detention center, which is not, I mean, then they would have to enter into an MOU with team. Then, I mean, it just maybe unnecessarily complicates it. I understand what you're trying to say. There's got to be a.
Well, what Jason's getting at is, as they need to go up, the detention center budget would have like laws of physics. I mean, it's an equal and opposite reaction, right? As one goes up, the other one goes down in kind of a commensurate fashion. If they have the funding on both pieces, then they just internally make those adjustments. Like I said, it could be a terrible idea.
Well, the best way to do it would be to dissolve the trust and have it become part of the county again, instead of the sheriff. But every meeting you get a chance.
But that's the new formula.
The concern is that they say they need all this money for the employees who run the NCICs. I know they've added more. Could they be using all this pot of money then for those employees and not taking it out themselves and team get shorted on the back end?
Well, there's definitely concerns. I'm just throwing that out there as a.
Chris has had the blood flowing out of his fingers.
Yeah, it's smoke and everything else. I would just say this, and listen, the only way that the program that we get to participate in works is with the coordination and the leadership of Bridget, Vicki, our judges, the detention center, the county. Everybody has to be working together, and it's working together. So what I'm about to say is not meant to be critical by any means, but I want to tell you, and all you have to do is read the newspaper. Oklahoma County's detention focus is what happens inside the walls of that detention center. That's all that they're caring about, and I understand that we're a partner, but I think if they control the purse strings, I think it's going to be, gosh, let's just focus here and not on the outside. Because it gets complicated at that point, and this program is with the county. It's been with the county. It was with the county when we signed on. The collaboration, for the most part, with the exception of we don't supervise, we can't control the volume or the productivity of the folk who are being supervised by the Oklahoma County Detention Center. But that part being what it is, maybe we believe there's room for productivity there. But aside from that, this model seems to be working. I mean, now.
And what you're talking about is a much bigger ask. I'm just asking.
But no, I wasn't suggesting moving the MOU and all of that between you and the detention center. The MOU would still be between us. We would just send the funds over there, and then they would allocate those funds. That way, the contract is the $1.38 million. The detention center, if they eat, which is just a little, it's basically what you were talking about a minute ago with them funding the 4 positions, the 3 that went down there for the NCICs plus Kathy's position, and they would be funding that, sending money to the DA's office to pay for the 1 employee and doing this over here. I'm just saying, instead of doing just those 4 positions, we still have the MOU with the expectation of what they're going to do, the MOU with.
So you're trying to answer my question earlier about how to get the money to team for their contract.
Yes.
I think a lot of the savings that Jason was talking about, so a lot of these people who are getting out on
You follow what I'm getting at?
medical savings and all that stuff, the jail is having a lot more money because these people are out, so they're not funding all these medical issues, all these mental health medications, all that. Those savings, though, I don't think would end up going back into team. That's just in this other pot with the jail savings. So I don't.
Well, no, because we would have the agreement between the county and team for the dollar amount. It'd be the $1.38 million, and then it would reference that dollar amount to the jail trust instead of having the MOU that we currently have, which is we're paying you $145,000. It's we're sending you $1.38 million to pay to send to team to provide these services.
How administratively would that work? If we've got a contract with team,
I don't know.
how do we encumber the money?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know, how would we obligate the jail to pay for that? If the trust as a whole decided, yeah, we're gonna skip team's payment this month.
Well, it's the same, but what I'm saying is what Jason was saying was doing exactly what I'm saying, just on a smaller scale for the employee at the DA's office and then the
What I
employees that
don't
they
understand is how let's say the detention center is like, absolutely, we'll fund those positions. Well, then it's, I know how the money would go. They'd start writing the checks for the people they've got that are doing the summaries, and then they would forward the money for the position at the DA's office to the DA. I don't know how you get the money to team.
Christie's got the answer for that. I mean, if the jail agrees to fund those positions, or the team contract, let's say, because again, I'm just throwing out the medical. We funded medical at $8.8 million this year. They just told us a month ago that it was going to now cost $7.3 million. That means that medical's been overfunded by $1.5 million. Okay, just simple arithmetic, right? So, to Christie's point, you just don't send them the money to begin with. They get it in 12 allotments. Right. So,
No, I'm here, and that probably is the way to do it.
DA's perspective, I'm super uncomfortable sending it over to the jail. Just, for protection for the DA and team.
Well, what I'm talking about is the same funding mechanism that we currently do. We wouldn't send them all of anything. We send it to them in a 12. So it would be the exact same way that we're doing it now. We would just send them the money and then they
would withhold. But you're saying withhold the difference from what we normally send to the jail in their 112 payment and add that to the amount we're sending the team in fulfillment of the MOU with
right.
Is that?
Yeah. I'm unable to speak freely on this issue, but I'd be.
Yeah. But that's what you're saying. I'm not saying right.
Yeah.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that. So I think maybe that's the recommendation, but it all hinges on BOCC for the county talking to the CJA, then trying to get an agreement to rework them.
So but I'm not clear here, because if Criminal Justice Authority was willing to just say, okay, you don't have to send us money for the employees that are not now our employees, right? They took those employees. I get how that would work. But then they would have to agree to send money to the DA's office for their employee, right?
Or we could withhold it and modify that MOU as well.
So then
where the county's paying directly to the DA, perhaps. Which we're doing now, we just would be getting money from a different.
So we'd be doing a budget reduction to the Criminal Justice Authority on the one side to be able to make up for it over here.
And we'd still be sending the DA the same amount of money, but we're able to do that from the money we're not sending to the detention center under a new mutual agreement. And then we would stop sending them extra money for the 3 people in the MOU with the detention center. And then the savings from what we're not sending to the DA and to the detention center then goes to, I don't know how much of the gap it fills up for the team contract, but that should get us there pretty close. And then that's how we fulfill our obligation in team.
We look at the 1.385 million.
You keep saying that, 1 million,
I heard that
budget amount is 1,362,503.
I keep saying 1.38.
1,362.
The IRS rounds up.
Yeah, 1,362,503 was what was budgeted with general fund after we added back those employees' benefit premiums, and then with 1,260 what their budget was.
You said earlier that we were only sending you 3. The contract was for 1.321.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I thought you
But
meant
that's what
the
you were
budget.
getting, which is less than
That's what I
what the
was
contract.
asking what the budget was.
Yeah, my figure was what the budget was.
Yeah, so the budget that, if we're not increasing the funding on it, we're at 1,362,503. And then the team contract is 1,321, 463.25. And then what was the DA contract?
Yay, for the employee, was $73,919.45.
And then for IT, what was that?
IT that we put for the DA for this was $42,400.
It's become apparent to me in these conversations that we've had over the last couple of months that every piece has a role. The DA's office clearly has a role that's needed. Team has a big portion of the role that's needed. The detention center, there's those folks on it. It sounds like the IT, even though there's a little bit of discussion about possibly paying for that service twice. But, I just, again, I go back to, I'm not trying to nickel and dime the jail, but at some point, if they're overfunded, not overfunded on their positions, because I think that they could always use more employees and more pay, but, if they have a ton of vacancies that aren't filled at this point, and frankly, living in that world, it's very difficult to maintain full staffing anyway. When we ran the jail, we were in a similar position, not quite like where they are, but, I'm a little confused on why they just wouldn't use the money that they already have for salaries and benefits to fund positions that would do a jail function.
Again, I think they will.
When the sheriff's office, I was talking to her earlier. I remember back when I was in standards compliance, running you and Robin around the jail every single day for 2.5 hours a day. And I physically did that by myself, pulling inmates. She would bring me a list over. Robin would give me a list. We'd start yanking. The sheriff's office paid for that at the time. It was a function of, court services that we just worked it into our budget. I don't see how this is any different. I don't understand why there's a separate MOU for this. To me, it's just a function of the jail. When you're working to get people out of your facility, get them into a better placement with supervision from organizations like Team, Hope, Red Rock, North Care, any of these things you're trying to get them into. To me, that's a jail function. That's a duty of a detention officer.
Which is why it was brought up, the MOU and making that part of their responsibility in doing it. But I don't think anybody else is on board with that, because I do see it the same way as a function of
It's a jail function. That's like someone needing an MOU for the DA's office to prosecute people. It's just kind of a function of the job to me. Personally, again, that's not staff. I just feel like that's a function. Your job is included but not limited to, and that's one of those things that's not limited to. You just, to me, that's.
So what I've heard is that we have a proposed total annual contract with Team for $1,321,463.25, correct? Then the DA's office is $73,919.45, and then IT services of $42,400. Those three, and I'm not including the employees at the detention center, because they're now employees at the detention center, so I'm excluding that for the moment. Those three pieces add up to $1,437,782.75. If we're going to stay with the original allocated budget of $1,362,503, the delta between those two numbers is $75,279.70. So what we would need the detention center to do would be to absorb the costs of the employees that were transferred to them to run NCIC reports and do a reduction in their allocation for this fiscal year from the county in the amount of $75,279.70. Then we would be we would have no more money going into it than what was previously budgeted. It would basically be the jail trust funding the additional 75,279.70. So if somebody is going to visit with the jail trust about absorbing those employees and absorbing that difference in that dollar amount, that's the dollar amount, the 75,279.70.
They're absorbing both though, the BA piece.
That's what you mean.
That's included in here, yeah.
Okay, all right. Yeah. They don't have french fries too.
Yeah, because if we don't send them 75,279.70, if we don't send it to them, we keep it here, we take that 75,279.70, add it to the 1,362,503, that gets us a number for court services that we then send a payment over to the DA's office.
Basis.
Yeah. Well, the 75,279 would be for the entire fiscal year, not monthly.
So what are,
Then how would that be divvied up between the DA and T?
Well, what we would do is the Board of County Commissioners would have a contract with Team with a total annual expense. When you look at the first 6 months and the second 6 months, the $1,321,463.25. We have an MOU with the DA's office for $73,919.45, and we would have our internal IT expenses of the $42,400. We have all of those expenses, which are $1,437,000. We only have 1.362 right now to pay that 1,437. We need an additional, we got to come up with $75,000 to be able to pay for all of it. So then we just reduce what we're going to give to the jail. Correct. 75,000. So I think the MOUs would still be with the county. We'd have the MOU with Team at the 1.321. We'd have the MOU with.
you don't change the MOU with the
Right,
DA
and
because it's in
continue
the
it, and then we'd have the funding. If the jail trust is willing and able to do that, I think moving forward, maybe we can have some more thoughts, because what I was trying to articulate earlier, and Brandon had mentioned it as well. To me, I see it as a function of the detention center, and if there's a way that we can.
Separate political subdivision.
Yeah.
That's my only problem with sending them money that pass through. But I think.
Otherwise, it's budget reductions,
No, I hear you.
and that's not usually, doesn't go over very well, right? So that's why I was trying to see if we could structure it a different way, but.
Well, but you know, you've got 1 point whatever savings just in medical, right? If they take it internally, so there's some wiggle room to reallocate.
That's
Certainly.
That's certainly a conversation. I don't know how we look at that from a budget perspective, but I mean, we know that is now overfunded to a certain number. Obviously, it's going to be 1.5 the first year because they've already spent
And
some of that on
personnel's been
turnkey.
overfunded,
Well,
well documented.
but at least with personnel, they have the ability to fill up to that number. And now, of course, the 5 months that they've not been filled, that's rollover money. But with medical, we know that that number's not going to magically grow.
Have they been
Those
within
costs are those costs.
24 people being fully staffed based on what we funded them for the last 2 or 3 or 4?
As of right now, I mean, going back and looking at the monthly meetings, they're on average down about 60 FTEs each month that they report, and they're about $75,000 a piece salaries, but that's all in. So again, just doing some quick math, that's $3 million on salaries. But again, I do believe in leaving the money there for them to at least try to fully fund, because I think that's an effort that they need to get to. I'm purely looking at a very black and white medical issue that, honestly, even if turnkey were still there, they were grossly overfunded on medical, because the number that the jail presented is nowhere near what turnkey's contract price was. So it was that they were overfunded on that by quite a bit. It is what it is at this point.
On the salary piece, one thing that we could do whether it's in this fiscal year or for next fiscal year, is we could look at what the average employee level that they have is, and we could say, say their budget's $33 million, and that's with their salaries for, they say, 320 people. We could do the allocation of the 112 every single month based on the average number of employees and what that salary expense is, and take the difference. Say it's $1.5 million. We could take that $1.5 million and put it in reserve, and that be truly locked down so that you say, hey, if and when you get to this employee count and you have to have this money, we'll have a special budget board meeting or our regular budget board meeting that month, and we'll transfer that money. That 1.5 is sitting there for you so that when you get to that employee level, you will have it. We guarantee you that it will be there. But if you get through the entire fiscal year and you don't hire up to that number, that 1.5 million in that example is still in reserve at the end of the year, and we're able to roll it out and use it for budgeting purposes for the next fiscal year.
However we get there, I'd certainly like to at least consider some option to make the team contract whole. However that works, I don't know, but.
Paul, I hate to put you on the spot, but as the BOCC representative on the trust, are you comfortable talking to Miles and seeing if he can run that trap with the trust and see if they would be willing to absorb?
Yes, can you send me those numbers?
I definitely can, yeah. So they would just be, we'd do a new MOU that would say that they have those employees that are doing the NCICs, but we're not paying them any money for it. There'd be $0.
Well, here's my only question, and I don't think you answered it before unless I just didn't get it. When you have the different numbers for IT, for the DA, for what the actual budget was, and I understand where we came up with this 75,000 whatever to make that whole.
Mm-hmm.
My question still is, how is that 75,000 divvied up to make them whole, between team, between DA?
DA's
Wouldn't get
whole.
any of that.
Yeah, the DA's office is already,
They're already.
yeah, they're
In essence,
encumbered
it's all
for the
going
entire
to
year, so it'll all go to
Yeah.
team
Right.
for now.
Fine.
Sorry, I didn't
That's all right.
understand your question.
That's all right.
Yeah.
Yep, as long as I have those numbers, I'll present that to Miles. Yep.
Yeah, the only people short now are this team. So it would all go there.
Okay. Don't have an issue with that.
And then we could have, if that agreement comes to pass, hopefully really soon, then we could have a special budget board. But we would need a special budget board.
Yeah, budget board is this Thursday. I
We
seriously
can't get it
doubt
done by then. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So we need to.
I don't want to put him under that kind of the gun, because you have Wednesday till 9 o'clock Wednesday morning to get a budget board agenda item on. So we probably would be looking at a special budget board. And after Paul has a conversation, I'm happy to call a special BET so we can hear exactly what Paul has heard, and we can then make a recommendation.
Can you just break that out for me in an email or something, and I'll run it by you.
That we'll do.
So another team contract has to go before the BOCC anyway, right?
Right.
So at that point, the DA's contract wouldn't go on, but we would consider asking the BOCC to accept another jail MOU. Is that one?
Yeah.
So,
Terminate.
You're only changing two MOUs, the one with the jail and the one with the team.
okay.
And you're doing a new one with the team for the second half of the fiscal year.
Okay, and so based on the numbers, the 1.32 earlier, so instead of being 675,000, the contract, the children will be 645,000,
646,
646 and change.
$5 and some cents.
Okay.
Christy, can you email me that number?
Yeah.
Thank you. Or just tell it to me.
Second 6 months would be $646,005.78.
Chris doesn't care how you fix the chicken, he just wants it at the table.
Right, but that's
So,
kind of my
yeah.
point earlier, he doesn't.
Yeah.
I appreciate you being here, I really do, but I also wish that you weren't having to spend your time here doing this, so if we can iron this out now, spend some time and effort now getting this done, then hopefully we're not back here doing this, in future years, other than maybe having conversations about, hey, look at all of this that we saved over here. We saved $200,000 because of X, Y, and Z. Are you interested in plowing $75,000 of that $200,000 or $150,000 of that $200,000 additional into our program, and we can do this, and this that we haven't been able to do in the past, right? Those are the conversations that I would like to be having in the future instead of these kind of.
And of whatever the daily amount per detainee is, I mean, there's gonna be some part of that that's fixed in the short term. Everything's variable in the long term, but, I don't know what that difference is too, so I don't know that it's just because somebody's not there that you receive, realize the whole $45 or $60 a day, but I do like what you're talking about. That big, the ultimate goal is just have the money follow where the people in the system are.
The only way to do that is to get the whole thing over there.
So, and to get rid of the jail trust.
That was twice, right?
If Jason keeps saying that, I'm gonna start making a motion to receive documents. I'm just telling you right now.
Yeah. Motion to receive report.
Exactly. Yeah, motion to receive reports. Or I'm gonna start objecting to the chair, adding it to the. I mean,
Trying to
so.
make it simple, that's all.
All right, so are we clear? Is everybody comfortable with the avenue that we are taking right now? Okay.
So we think we can adjourn today and call it, what's that?
We're not making a
Not
recommendation.
making a recommendation.
Right.
I mean, my only question then becomes, that may only be obvious to me, is that if the jail tells us to go fly a kite, then what do we do?
Well, if the jail tells us to fly a kite, I guess we go fly a kite.
Hopefully it's windy. I mean, I don't, so I think that would be the only question that I would have, is if at some point that comes to realization and the jail is unwilling to do that.
They won't be.
Okay.
We hope not.
This is the hope fund, the hope account,
But
the optimist
Yeah,
account.
the optimist, yeah.
what I would recommend though is in the event that Paul's not successful convincing
We'll blame
Miles
him.
to
We'll
ask,
blame
and then
him.
Miles isn't successful doing that, all of us kind of, contemplate in our brains what flying the kite scenario might look like.
Just do it when it's thundering. So do we?
So then after, I speak with Commissioner, I contact you to organize another.
Yeah.
We're gonna have another
Yeah.
special.
So we'll adjourn today, we can have a special.
Yeah. Yeah, because depending upon the answer and whatever, we might need different agenda language. So, yeah, we'll call a special.
And then I would, today, when appropriate, I would move to authorize you to give an update to the budget board on whatever the reality is on Thursday. I mean, we may know more then, but to give them an update, not a recommendation, but let them know that we're working on it and what our approach is and what our goal is the whole team harmless for the full fiscal year. And if we hear something back from the detention center before then, we can tell them what we're hearing, and then we'll come back with a recommendation after a special meeting. But
If you want me to do that, I would recommend that we have a specific agenda item for that, because the agenda item that I normally address is specifically related to the BET watch list. So, hang on. We've got a pretrial service program on the watch list, so I can address it just on the watch list.
So no.
Yeah, no, sorry.
And that's this Thursday.
Yeah.
Right.
No. I've done a lot of thinking out loud today, and that's very.
Well, I start writing, you'll change your minds.
do we need a motion for that, or can you just wait? Okay.
I'll update them on on our conversations, so. And I mean, I'm sure you guys will update your elected official on it anyway, so I'm sure they will not be surprised. But, Commissioner, did you have anything? Okay. All right, anything else on the agenda that anybody wants to discuss? Circle back to?
Mr. Chair, can I just ask a question?
Yes.
So, if everything goes according to plan, what would be the process and how soon would we know if we have a contract for January 1st?
As soon as I hear back from Paul, I'll call a special meeting, so it'll be 48 hours from then to have a special BET. And I think at the same time, I will get with Brandy or Commissioner's office specifically to, let them know if we want to have a special budget board meeting, because we'll need to have a special budget board meeting. And that could be scheduled probably pretty quick. And then after that, once budget board meets and if they approve the recommendation that we have, then we would get the updated contract from you and an updated MOU for the jail trust on a BOCC meeting. So, I mean, we're probably talking early to mid-December would be my guess, maybe early December. If we run really fast.
I've got a team board meeting in 4 minutes, and they're gonna want to know. So
Okay.
thank you guys very
You
much.
bet. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. All right, any citizens wish to participate? Board comments? Clerk? District 3?
No.
Treasurer?
No.
Court clerk?
No.
Assessor? Sheriff? None from District 1. Any new business? We got a motion to adjourn. Do we have a second?
Second.
Got a motion second. All those in favor of getting out of here?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? We're getting